Hello and welcome to HFMA Talk, the podcast for NHS Finance. I'm Mark Orchard, Chief Financial Officer at Portsmouth Hospitals University NHS Trust. This episode continues our series of conversations where I get to talk to some of my current and former NHS colleagues working across all sectors and geographies right across the UK and beyond. But to today, we have another very special episode where I get to catch up with a hugely respected former colleague, Bill Shields. Bill, as lots of you will know, is currently Chief Financial Officer at Bermuda Health Board, a role that he has held for the past 5 years and since April 2017. Before leaving the UK for Bermuda, Bill held a number of senior posts across the NHS in England, including CFO level roles at Imperial College Healthcare, London, the South West Strategic Health Authority, and where I am today, Portsmouth Hospitals. So Bill, a very warm welcome to you today. Thank you so much for joining us at HFMA Talk. How are you?
I'm very well, Mark. It's really good to see you again.
So let's get started. And listen, I know, and many people listening to this will know that you are such a proud Scotsman, right? So you grew up in Dundee. You later graduated with a master's degree at the University of Glasgow. Can you start by maybe just telling us a bit more about your roots and perhaps, the sort of things in your early years that shaped the man that you became later in life, Bill?
I was brought up in a very working class household. I went to comprehensive school. I was the first person from my family to go to university. I went to university and studied social sciences. I was very interested in politics and history. That's what I did my degree in. I had aspirations, I think, at that time to work in politics. I had no desire or ambition to ever be an accountant. It was not something that I had ever thought about. And I think I just ended up as an accountant purely through chance. I had this kind of vague idea that I wanted to work in the public sector. And at the time, that was probably more geared towards government or local authority than the NHS. And the transition there really was I had an interview at this time, back in the day, with CIPFA. And CIPFA used to do a sort of screening interview. And I had this interview in Dundee at what was then Tayside Regional Council with the deputy finance director, not deputy, the deputy finance director. And that obviously went quite well. And then the results of that interview were circulated to potential employers. And the one I ended up, I had a few interviews, one in Northern Region, NHS, one in Staffordshire County Council, one for the Scottish NHS, and the one I ended up with was South Western Regional Health Authority. And as a consequence of that, I was asked when I got the job, when I got the offer where I wanted to work, and I said, well, I don't mind, I've got no idea. I had no idea the geography of the South West. And they said to me, what about Cornwall? And I said, yeah, that sounds fine. This is someone who couldn't drive and had no idea where Cornwall was. I very quickly found out where Cornwall was when I got on the train in Dundee one night, and 14 hours later got off the train in Truro and thought, yeah, that's a long journey. It's not one that I fancy doing too often. And that was how I kind of, went from Dundee via university in Glasgow with a vague ambition about, a career in government politics, something like that, to ending up in the NHS. I've always been numerate. Mainly mental arithmetic, I think. So I've always been quite numerate and quite good with numbers. But I was always much more interested in written English and literature than I was in numbers. But being quite good at numbers, I think, has been something that's always stood me in reasonably good stead.
I didn't realise you'd actually started in the Southwest, Bill. So, and listen, no desire to be an accountant. How many times have I heard that on these conversations, Bill? That seems to be a common thread with all of us, actually. So a few things I'm interested in really there, and one of which you've already kind of got into a bit is, so first one is, you're a long way from home. Cornwall's a long way, Southwest is a long way from Dundee. So I'm really interested in how you've sort of made those decisions along the way, if you like. And secondly, one really interested at this point in your career, so the formative years, I suppose, right before you become a DOF and then your early DOF roles, in what support you may have got from others. Because I know you've been instrumental in supporting others through their careers, myself included. And I just wonder what support you got in terms of, your growth and development in those early years as well.
It's an interesting question, actually. I'm a very determined person, and I when I think about, why I left home, I left home when I was 18. That was not something I ever really regretted. I have got a tendency to, I know I'm like, I've had a lot of feedback from people. I'm pretty much all or nothing. So, it's 100% pretty much from me. And that sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. It can scare people. It's an approach that doesn't always work. I am used to putting a lot into things and getting success as a consequence. So I'm very determined, very tenacious. I don't know if it's a Scottish thing or a Dundonian thing. I really don't, but it's just the way that I've always been. And, when I take a bit more time, I think now in my life to reflect on things and think them through. But once I made a decision, I'm pretty much all in. And that's always been the situation in life or in my career. So, I moved from Scotland to Cornwall. I moved from Cornwall to Newcastle upon Tyne. I moved from Newcastle to Norwich. I moved from Norwich to Northamptonshire when I worked in Bedford. I moved from there to Colchester. Then I moved to Portsmouth. Then I moved back to the southwest in Taunton. And then I worked in London, worked away from home for a period of time. And, I think, and as a consequence of that, other parts of your life do suffer. I'm very self-obsessed, probably even selfish in terms of my career. And I've always put my career first, if I'm honest. And, I've reflected on that, I think, in later life. And maybe that's not always the best thing. But I do find work very rewarding. And it's something that's really a really important part of my life. Maybe that's a sad thing to say, but it's always been something that's very rewarding for me. In terms of support, I wouldn't say that I didn't have much, but the support network at the time, I think when I was a trainee, there was significant support. So I started off as a regional finance trainee before FMTS actually existed. The regions had their own schemes, and there was a lot of support in that period. I think beyond that, I pretty much made my own decisions in terms of career. When I left Cornwall, I applied, I think, for about 4 or 5 jobs. I'm not one of these people that says, oh yes, I've always gotten the first job that I've applied for. That's never happened to me in my entire career. Sometimes it's been a long, hard, arduous process. And I wasn't somebody that was tapped on the shoulder. Jobs just came up and I applied for them. So that's why I had this very strange career moving from one end of the country to the other, which was just about where the jobs actually occurred. And I think I've just been pretty lucky, really. The one thing that I have done is that when there's been an opportunity, I've almost always said, yes, I will do that, even if I wasn't entirely sure what it was. So when I moved from Cornwall to Newcastle to work for Northern Regional Health Authority, there was a point in time where my line manager said to me, there's a new thing coming out called the Private Finance Initiative. Do you want to be involved in it? And I said, yes, please, without any idea what it was. Suddenly found myself as the regional expert. And on the back of that went to Norwich, where they had one of the first PFIs at Norfolk and Norwich. And then on the back of that became a deputy director of finance and then became a director of finance. And, I think that the one thing that I would say is that when opportunity presents itself, I have always taken that opportunity and it stood me in good stead. Maybe I've just been lucky. But that's the thing that I have done. There have been people in my career that have been instrumental in developing me. So I would say that one of those would be my finance director in Norwich, who was David Stout, who was then also the finance director in Essex Health Authority when I was in Colchester. And I always found David very good sounding board and very good in terms of advice, career-wise and professionally. And then, of course, the other person I think who was a giant in my career was Serene Carruthers. And the opportunity to work for somebody like Ian was something that I wasn't going to pass up. It was always interesting working for Ian. There was never a dull moment. There were ups and downs, but he was a phenomenal chief executive and a visionary, and I learned so much working for him. And without working for him, I didn't think I'd be doing what I am doing now or where I am today. So he was probably the single most instrumental person in my career. And also what he did was he made me learn that even though I was a senior experienced DOF when I left Portsmouth. I'd been a DOF in 5 or 6 different organisations, and I think pretty successfully. But what I learned as an SHA finance director, I think, was more important than anything else I ever did. And the other thing, I'll be honest about myself, and people will know this. I'm a bit of a show off, and I do like to showboat a bit. And I remember, so the idea of going from an acute trust to an SHA and then back again to a teaching hospital, I didn't think anybody had done it successfully. And so, of course, and I'm not like this anymore, much more reflective and older, I felt that, it was something that I could do, and I wanted to prove it. And a lot of my career has been about doing things for the sake of it and proving myself. And I guess that comes from, insecurity. Despite what people would say, I'm not the most secure or confident person. And a lot of the things that I've done have been about proving myself and proving that I can do things. So in an SHA context, the idea about balancing the financial position to within £1,000, which when I look back on this and reflect on it, was crazy and unnecessary. But I've done things in my career just for the sheer hell of it, and enjoyed that. But was it the right thing to do? It was fun, and I've always tried to have fun in a job sense and challenge myself and push my team as hard as I can. And I think that's rewarding for people, but it can be a bit scary. And I do quite like that roller coaster aspect of work, which can actually scare a lot of people. And it's something that I actually quite enjoy. The one thing I hate is being bored. I really hate in a career context having a job that is not rewarding and is too easy.
I wanted to just explore the bit about the talent that you were surrounded by. You surrounded yourself with immense talent that people like Elizabeth Omani and others who are still there now, who are still giants in their own way. With Elizabeth's the regional director now, and if I look at the sheer talent that you surround yourself with, and you created in that team there at Southwest, that's very recognisable all these years later, in the current regional team and in the Southwest patch generally. So I just wanted to take you back there and dwell on some of that then. So why did you leave Portsmouth for that role? What did that role mean for you? You've talked about some of what you achieved, but could you just unpack that a bit more for me?
I felt at the time that I'd gone as far as I could as an acute trust FD. We had in Portsmouth, when I joined, it was franchised. The then chief executive was the franchisee, Alan Bedford, who unfortunately passed away now. And he was the franchisee, and I was the first person he appointed as the franchisee. And probably the only person he appointed, actually. We were 0-starred back in the days of star ratings. The organisation had a significant financial problem. It had a terrible estate. It was looked down on as the poor relation to Southampton University Hospitals Trust. And I learned when I came to Hampshire the enmity that exists between Southampton, which always feels to me like it's in the southwest, and Portsmouth, which feels very much like it's in the southeast. So, even the accent's very different, And, Portsmouth, the industrial town, and Southampton is the sort of wealthy neighbour. And at the time, Southampton saw itself very much as the university hospital, and Portsmouth was a sort of pile 'em high, sell it cheap type organisation at the time, with one regional specialty, which was renal transplantation. And I was really determined that PHT, as it was, would be more successful. So, again, through determination, spite, whatever you want to call it, I felt that financially dragged the organisation into being a robust financial position, to the point where it was the most successful organisation in Hampshire financially. And and I think even before the Southwest, it's important to appoint a good team. I brought in Neil Kemsley as my deputy, who had been in St George's, and you can see from Neil's career subsequently, absolutely fantastic individual. And I felt quite different to me. So it was really important that I had somebody that was not the same as me. And I think in terms of building a team, it's always important that you get people that are very different. And Neil, I felt, was much more of a people person than me. Very, very good with the team and very affable. And that worked really well for me. And I think during the time that I was there, I was asked by Sir Ian, because he was overseeing Hampshire at a point in time before SHAs formed, to get involved in two of the PCTs or CCGs. I think it was PCTs at the time. And it was, I think it was South East Hampshire and Fairbairn Gosport. They'd formed a cluster. And I became the interim DOF there at the same time as I was at PHT, which was quite a strange experience. And effectively, Neil stepped up to be the DOF, and I still had the accountable role for both organisations. And at the same time as that, I was then also doing the final negotiations on the PFI with Treasury. So I did the final negotiation at HMT, which again was something that was an experience. And I'd experienced a lot of stuff in Portsmouth. And when SHAs came around, I'd been thinking about being a chief exec, and I'd applied for a couple of chief exec roles because I couldn't see there was anything bigger in the world of finance. And then something bigger did come along. And I was actually approached initially about South Central. And I'd had a few meetings with Matt Britnell. And then suddenly out of the blue, Sir Ian asked me if I was interested in Southwest. And the two jobs were kind of going at the same time. I had an interview for South Central. I think it was on something like the Thursday. And suddenly an interview for Southwest was scheduled the day before. And I went for the interview and I got the job and withdrew from South Central and went to the Southwest. So, that was the reason I went. And it was something very, very different. It was an opportunity to move back to the Southwest, to relocate my family there, to have a different sort of lifestyle. I had a great lifestyle in Hampshire, but it was just something different. And I think in terms of the team, like I've said, you're only as good as your team. And I never understand. I still don't understand to this day the management style where there's so many managers, directors, CFOs, CEOs, people in C-suite that are scared of their team, and they're scared of appointing the best people that you can. It seems to be it's just so obvious. The better the people that you appoint, the easier your life is. And I've always seen it like that. And and sometimes again it comes back to my desire to try things out that people haven't done. I mean, some people would call that innovative. I mean, maybe it's just me having random ideas and being a bit show-offy sometimes. So I think that certainly in the Southwest, I inherited a great team. I mean, they weren't all doing what they were doing at the time. And my first deputy there was Bill Boer, who a lot of people will know. Bill was an absolutely excellent finance director and still is, and consultant. And he was absolutely immense as my deputy. And he had been a PCT finance director who hadn't been appointed in one of the many, many reorganisations. And I brought him in when we were looking to re-employ or continue to employ displaced staff. And he was absolutely pivotal in the development in the Southwest. And I had a team that included him. I had a team of, back in the day, this Band 9s. I think I had 5 Band 9s at the time, which was quite unusual for an SHA. I had performance, I had information, and I had finance. And Elizabeth was someone who I'd appointed. Then I think she went on maternity leave and then she came back. And Bill had a desire to move on to Dorset County as the finance director. And I made Elizabeth my deputy. I think that history has borne out the fact that was a fantastic appointment. And you've only to look at the work that she did in the Southwest, nationally, and then back again in the Southwest to see that she is somebody with a huge amount of talent, probably more than me, if I'm honest. And that was proven to be the right decision, and I would do it again. But the important thing for me is about building a team. I think the other thing about being an SHA finance director was the community of finance directors. And, I didn't always think myself as it's almost like being a group CFO. There were 40 organisations. They didn't all report to me, but I did feel professionally that I was leading the finance profession in the Southwest. And it was something that I really, really enjoyed and something I took very, very seriously. I'd been the HFMA branch chairman in the east of England and then South Central. I think I might even be the only person that's been a branch chairman twice. And so, I'd kind of had that exposure to, and I'd always been involved in HFMA. I'd had that exposure to, that kind of finance community, which is really important. And a lot of people, I think, in other professions look quite enviously at the finance profession in the NHS because that kind of camaraderie and the kind of work hard, play hard approach that we've got, I think is something that's not necessarily evident in other professions. So I kind of had that background. And then there were things that I wanted to try out. There's things that when you're an SHA DOF, or certainly when I was, that you could try out. There were things that you couldn't do as an acute trust finance director. So, I was responsible. It's a huge responsibility. I was responsible for people's career development and their professional development, and actually in a lot of ways for their lives, certainly their work lives, and their ability to earn money and their ability to actually, succeed as individuals. And that's a big responsibility. And it's something that I took very, very seriously. Sometimes that's really difficult. There was about 2 or 3 occasions when I had to move people on. And that's never good. And you always want that to be something where the individual recognizes that there's an issue and it's the right thing to do. And sometimes, fortunately, that occurs and sometimes it doesn't. And that's a really difficult process. I know I've got a reputation for being quite hard-nosed, but, on a one-to-one basis, when you're having a conversation with somebody about their livelihood and their career, it is very, very difficult. The good side, though, is about actually seeing, putting people in roles, supporting them, interviewing them, appointing them, and then seeing them succeed. And that is great. When you actually see somebody do well, it's something that actually made me feel good. I think, I did try a few things out that hadn't been done before. So I do look, and this is not just in Southwest, but in Imperial as well. Some of the titles, Director of Operational Finance, that was me that invented that one. So, and I should have copyrighted that one. Moving acute trust DOFs into PCTs, that was something that I felt would work. And I saw that with Neil, saw that with Charlotte Moore, and I think it was something, I think I saw it with John Yarnold. So again, it was something that felt to me to be the right approach. At the time, one of the things that occurred to me was that far too many PCT finance directors were being dominated and turned over really by the large acutes. And the only way I could see that could change was to get some of those people and convince them that they could go into those roles. And then, as a consequence of that, shift the paradigm and shift the balance of power back to the commissioner. And I know that wasn't popular, particularly as somebody that spent almost their entire career in trusts and in the provider side. But then again, when you move into a regulator, you've got to take a different approach. I said kind of jokingly before the fact that we try to balance the financial position within £1,000. So was that the right thing to do? Possibly not. But the thing that irritated me was that there was this, and irritation's another kind of constant for me. The Audit Commission at the time had made this, I thought, quite banal comment, and not banal, trite comment about balancing the NHS financial position is like landing a jumbo jet on a postage stamp. That was what they said. And I thought, that's just nonsense. Of course you can balance the position. And I thought, challenge accepted. We will land that jumbo jet on that postage stamp. And we almost did it. I think we got within about less than £1,000 of the control total that I had agreed with David Flory at the time. And yeah, maybe not the right thing to do. But what was really important about that was the rigour that had to go into that, about how you constantly work to an end point, and the approach that was required, and the communication that was required. And I think the next year, what we did was we decided, and again, the second thing that irritated me was this whole thing about, the NHS financial position is like a hockey stick. It kind of gets worse and worse, then gets better. And so that year I thought, well, actually, we'll have a financial position where we'll agree the control total at the start and it won't move. Maybe it's like a lot of things I do. Maybe the execution was probably not right, but I think the end point was a desirable end point.
I mean, I'm listening to this and it's just bringing back so many memories because, of course, I lived through that. I was PCT finance director in Bournemouth and Poole, and then later in that journey, I was at what was the PCT cluster then in Bristol, North Somerset, South Gloucester. So lived that journey, and of course, the landing the jumbo jet on a postage stamp that you're referring to, of course, is land within £1,000. Is let's put that in context for everyone. It says £8 billion worth of spend across 40 organisations. We're not talking about the SHA statutory books here, Bill, are we? We're talking about 40 organisations that aggregate up to £8 billion worth of spend that lands within £1,000.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story about that. So I was an SHA DOF at the time, as you know, and we used to have these monthly meetings with David Florey, and we'd agree the control total. And so I went around the table, and it was the usual sort of suspects. The northern SHAs went first with their huge control totals, 200 million, 150 million, 250 million. They had a range, I think it was about plus or minus 10 million. And David got to me and he asked me, I can't actually remember the number. I remember it was 140 something. It was 140, say it was 146 million, 310,000 or something like that I agreed with. And I remember he said, really? And I said, yes. Do you want a range? No, thank you. And I remember the next DOF meeting that we had in the Southwest, and we talked to the DOFs who were stunned by this idea. And I remember Bill's presentation when he said, we've actually established a range which I think was plus or minus £5,000 or £10,000, and we reckoned that we could work that through within the SHA because the SHA position had enough flexibility that we could balance that. And I remember him saying, there's a line that we're really clear that you can't cross, and we've called it the firing line. And some bright spark said, why is it called the firing line? And Bill said, do you really need to ask that question? That was it. And we managed it. It was probably, like I say, the execution probably wasn't the right thing to do. It was probably a bit over the top. But I think it was good because we proved that by working together collaboratively, pretty much anything's possible. And that was the lesson that I took from that.
You talked a bit about you took in that role the role of the finance professional leader for the whole system really seriously. So my recollection at that time, we had before you arrived, we had FSD. We had a graduate trainee scheme across the Southwest, and we had a HFMA branch. But within about 5 minutes of you joining us, you kind of fused those three things together and brought all of the 40 DOFs together in a way that everyone owned, everyone contributed, and we had really strong. All of a sudden, we had a really strong patch. Joe Teep, I think, was the branch chair at the time, but we had a really strong ethos that I think still survives to today in the Southwest. To be fair,
well, it seemed kind of obvious to me that, why would you have three different ways of doing things when we were all trying to achieve the same end? I felt that it wasn't that I couldn't see the point of FSD, but FSD for me always seemed a bit peripheral and a bit, it wasn't kind of mainstream. And to me, I was the leader of the profession, whether that was something that was justified or not. I found myself as the leader of the finance profession by dint of being the SHA DOF, and I was absolutely determined that it would be something that was successful. So, there was the SHA role there, the ability to fund. There was also FSD, and then I think the other thing was the training scheme. So I seem to recall that we actually we reached an agreement about the training scheme because again. I I am a CIPFA qualified accountant, and I just couldn't understand why we weren't training people in CIPFA. The national scheme was had decided to start training people ACMA at the time, CGMA, and I couldn't get my head around that. And so I think we actually formed an agreement with CIPFA to have our own training scheme at a point in time. Was that the right thing? I don't know, but I mean, it just seemed that you back in the day when you're an SHA off, you had a lot of power. I mean, it wasn't like untrammeled power, but what's the saying? With great power comes great responsibility. So you've got to take that really seriously. And I was given the opportunity to actually influence careers and to ensure that we had a successful training scheme, and I was absolutely determined that I would do what needed to be done. And that meant, FSD becoming part of the mainstream. That meant having our own training scheme. That meant that finance staff development and the development of finance directors was an integral part of the SHA's role. So, yeah, and I would have done that again. And at the time about 15,000 finance professionals in the NHS, and it was really important for me that they had a clear career path and that they were recognised and respected, as a group within the NHS, a really important and integral part of the NHS. And one of the things I always found about people that work in finance in the NHS is almost all of them are there through choice. And their commitment to the NHS values and ethos is as strong, if not stronger, than any other group in the NHS, which is a pity, because they are typically vilified by other professionals in the NHS, and I've always thought that is completely unjustified. There's nobody that works in finance in the NHS that takes has any joy or takes any pleasure in some of the decisions that we have to make. But we know that somebody has to make those decisions. They're really hard decisions, and that's why we do it, because we're committed to the ethos and the values.
So you're in the Southwest. You've really taken that finance professional leadership role to really push that as far as you could possibly push it in that role, I suppose, and really set the bar high for what came later. But during that time, you then went on to become the national president of HFMA about 2009, 2010. You'd been on the HFMA board for a period of years running up to that. And here you are on the national stage, and you absolutely put your stamp on that in terms of your theme, building world-class finance, which you subsequently then went to take into Imperial College Healthcare after leaving Southwest and make that operationally reality in terms of what building world-class finance means. So unpack that a bit for us, Bill, if you may. First of all, just touch on your bit about president, but then let's get into the transition into Imperial and what you achieved there.
Being me, I had wanted to be the national chair for some time. I think a lot of people say, and I'll be honest, a lot of people say, oh, I never really wanted this. I wanted to be the national chair. And I felt I should have been the national chair even before I was. And that's just the kind of person that I am. And I had put my name forward a number of times and said I was interested in doing it. And, I've got enough self-awareness to know that I can be a divisive character. So I'm very outspoken. I often say what I think. And, not everybody sees that that's a characteristic they want in somebody that's got to be very statesmanlike. So I get that now. I didn't at the time. I was quite irritated at the time. But, as I've kind of gotten older and a bit more reflective, I realised that I had to wait my turn. When I became the chair, Mark and I discussed, themes, and we talked about a few things. And I can't remember, we actually had a theme that was agreed. And I think I was probably out for a walk, or I was in usually the shower where I have most of the ideas that I have. And it just suddenly came to me, building world-class finance. And I thought, yep, that's what it's going to be. And I talked to Mark. I said, look, Mark, I want to change the theme. I've got this idea, building world-class finance. And he said, well, what does it mean? I said, well, it's about how we get the finance profession in the NHS to be as good as anything. What it's like in other healthcare industries, other jurisdictions, and what it's like in non-healthcare. That's what we need to be looking at. That's what we need to build. I think I was the first. I don't think I'm the only chair, but I was definitely the first chair that went to every branch conference. So again, I was determined that, something that hadn't been done would be done. That is my sheer bloody mindedness, I think, and determination to do stuff. But the commitment there really about building world-class finance, I think, was the thing that I wanted to do. What I realized is that there's only so much you can do in that national chair role, because, you don't actually have staff. You've got to get people to accede to the things that you're doing. So that left me a bit frustrated, I think. And then the opportunity at Imperial came up. It wasn't my first option. I was looking to go into consultancy after the Southwest, and that didn't come off. And Imperial was sort of on the rebound. But when I got the job and I saw that they had a huge financial problem, I was determined that we'd fix the financial problem. I was determined that in order to do that, we had to have a theme that would galvanize the organization. And I was determined that we'd be the best. And what I saw was, to me, Imperial was a bit of a sort of sleeping giant. It was the first AHSC. It wasn't an FT. It had a huge financial problem. When I got there, the GL that they had actually had alphanumeric and numeric account codes in it, because they hadn't even standardized on one basis when they brought Hammersmith Hospital and St Mary's together. So there was loads and loads of work that needed to be done. So, building world-class finance was the theme that galvanized that. And I was really fortunate. I had John Yarnold there as a consultant to help me, who was unbelievable. I think, to my mind, the consummate finance professional. And again, somebody that's been really pivotal in my career, actually. Somebody that was an excellent sounding board. And when you talk about development, even as a CFO in a teaching hospital, having someone who has done it, been it, seen it all. John was a finance director when I was a trainee. He had been a finance director forever. I'm probably getting just as bad now that I'm getting as old as I am. I've been a finance director for about 25 years, on and off. And that was really important for me. We had a great relationship with EY. When I got there, it wasn't going so well. I refocused that, repositioned that. And again, they were pivotal in helping to deliver building world-class finance. We had a finance team where morale was unbelievably low. The finance team was based in the Hammersmith Hospital. Most of the work in Imperial was taking place at Charing Cross and at St Mary's. And I described the finance directorate as being remote, geographically, and philosophically. And that's what they were. They just weren't part of the internal machinations of the organisation. So I moved the finance directorate physically. I created the concept of the director of operational finance. It's something, if I'm honest, I've got to give John the credit for that. We spent a lot of time, kind of working through the structure and figuring out what we needed to do. And my intention there, again, was to do something that hadn't been done. My view was that Imperial afforded me the opportunity of having a finance structure that nobody had before. It was a huge organisation, almost £1 billion turnover at the time. And thinking about the management cost allowance, we could really spend a lot of money on a really great finance structure. And as a consequence of that, I thought, well, what we'll do is we'll create something that is actually deliberately over the top. It will be a finance structure it will be a bit top heavy, but it will demonstrate that we are an organisation that really means business. So me as the CFO, I brought in Marcus Thorman as the Director of Operational Finance, and he'd been an FD in Kettering before. So, here's an experienced finance director who's now the doof. And then I had 3 deputy finance directors reporting into him. And one of those, and then we had reporting into the deputies, finance business partners. So I changed the structure with the concept of the business partner. This is something that we borrowed from industry, and something that both John and EY were really helpful in saying this is what successful businesses have done. So we created the concept of the finance business partner. And again, what that did is it created a career structure within an organisation so that we could develop people and we could bring them on without them having to leave the organisation. Obviously, I wouldn't stand in the way of people leaving the organisation, but we had a much clearer career ladder within the organisation so that people could develop. And then the building world-class finance piece. And some people had to exit the organisation. Not everybody was of the right mindset and of the right caliber to work in the organisation. My view about Imperial was really, really very straightforward. We had some of the best physicians in the world. Penicillin had been invented by Fleming while he was a doctor practicing at St Mary's. My view is that if the finance function wasn't world class when the medical specialties were world class, by definition, it was holding the organisation back. And I was very clear. I remember having everybody from the finance function at this meeting up in the Hammersmith hospital, and it was day 2 of my job, and I basically did what I do. I set my stall out, and I said, this is the way it's going to be, and we will build world-class finance in this organisation, or we will die trying. And we didn't die. I'm not sure if we actually built it, but we made some significant steps towards taking an organisation that was a sleeping giant, that was a bit of an embarrassment, to having been an organisation with a very healthy surplus, with a very healthy cash position, and developmentally, I think that was really important. I think the 2 jobs in my career that shaped me, and I really, to this day, I can't really choose between them, were Imperial and the Southwest SHA. For different reasons, they were very important. And the things that the parallels between the 2 are taking an organisation that was struggling to a path towards success, maybe not getting there, but certainly put it on the right tracks. Creating and building a really great team, and having a theme to galvanise people so that whether they're internal or externally about how you will take the organisation forward. They were the kind of key learning points for me in that organisation. One thing that we also did, I'm not talking about myself here, we went from a position of a finance department that people thought, I don't want to work there, to an award-winning finance department. And that's something that I'm really proud of. I think we won 2 HFMA awards. I remember the year we were nominated for 4 or 5 awards, which had never happened before. And we won 2 of those. I still think we should have won them all, but we won 2 of those. We won the HSJ Finance Team of the Year award when they used to do that. That was good. That was something I was really proud of. And then, fortunately, I was HFMA Finance Director of the Year. Whether I deserved it or not, I think it was just probably because I'd been around. I think it was a bit like the Oscar for somebody that's never actually won an award for a film. It's like I felt like Peter O'Toole. I didn't actually get the award for any particular thing that I'd done. It was just like a lifetime achievement award because people thought, well, Bill hasn't got one, so might as well give him one. But I'm still proud of that.
You ended the last 6 months or so at Imperial. Of course, you were interim chief exec as well, and then you went down and spent a year at Royal Cornwall Hospitals as interim chief exec in a bit of a turnaround role, and then joined EY in a sort of consultancy role as a health advisor, advising over England and Wales, of course, in certain organisations. Anything particularly you want to draw out there? Oh, and I want to then, I'm interested in how you moved really from Imperial to Bermuda, but via those couple of points.
Yeah. I think Imperial had run its course really, and I thought about chief exec roles before, and it was something that I needed to exercise it. I think, I'm talking about exorcise. I needed to exercise the desire to be a chief executive, and I'm glad I've done it, and I'll never do it again, because I absolutely hated it. It's not for me. There are a lot of very good finance directors that have gone on to be extremely good and accomplished chief executives. Elizabeth is effectively a chief executive in that role. I can think of a number of other people, Suzanne Tracy, Sue Jakes, there's a lot of people that have been really successful. It just was not for me. And the turnaround role there, my learning from that is I went in there thinking that there was nothing that was impossible, thinking that I was the person that could finally turn Cornwall around, and I wasn't. And it was probably the first failure in my career actually, and it was quite I was quite solemn actually, and it was a salutary lesson for me, that not everything is possible. I wasn't successful in creating the team that I wanted to, and I've got to take the responsibility for that. I was successful in galvanizing the organization because we went through a major process of change in the organization. I think it was, what was it called? Was it leadership into action or something like that? I can't remember exactly what it was, but the organization again was one that was challenged. I remember the story I tell about Cornwall. This is true. This is not an urban myth. This is true. They had the third worst staff satisfaction survey in the NHS. I remember sitting down with one of the C-suite colleagues. I think it was the HR director, and he said, this is really bad. And I said, yeah, I know. He said, but you've got to see some of the comments in the free text. And I said, really? I said, look at this one. And it said, my cat could do a better job of managing this organisation than the exec, and my cat is dead. And I thought, yes, Houston, we've got a problem. And I think I did a good job in galvanising staff. I mean, I remember we did a number of sessions where we got staff to talk about the problems that they had and how we could, as a team, work that through. And I did 11 meetings, I think it was, with about 50 people. So I managed to reach out to about 600 staff across the organisation. And I did those events. And, that was a good experience for me because it's something that I'd never done. It was very, very different from dealing with finance professionals. It was with clinicians. It was way out of my comfort zone. And I realised that I could do it. Did I enjoy it? Yeah, a bit I did. But, did I enjoy being a chief exec? I mean, one of the things that I found is that when you're a CFO, your team is broadly pointing in the same direction as you. You've got the same shared goals, or you should do. And, you might not all be pointing kind of true north, but, you kind of, it might be northeast, might be, northwest, but you're broadly pointing in the same direction. When you're the CEO, you've got people that are pointing south and west and east, and they've got completely different ideas and values and ideologies. And I found that really, really challenging. I could not galvanize those individuals. And that's a feeling of mine, I think, into a shared purpose and a shared desire. And, I was the interim chief exec. After 10 months, the job came up. I decided that when the job was advertised, it wasn't for me. I spent 3 months working for the TDA while I was between jobs. And, that was good because although I think geographically it was a bit of a challenge for me, it introduced me to consultancy. And that then allowed me, when the opportunity arose, to have a conversation with EY, and I went to work for EY as an executive director, associate partner for them. And as you say, I worked across England and I worked in Wales. Me being me, of course, I decided to have more engagements than anybody else. So, I remember, typically on a Monday, I'd get on the train in Taunton, go up to Birmingham, change trains, go to Carlisle, be in the office in Carlisle for 1 p.m, work until 7, be in Carlisle the next day. On Wednesday, get a train down to London to do the engagement that I was running in Homerton, and then go across to Wales the next day to do engagement in Cardiff, and then back in the office if I was lucky on a Friday in Bristol, and then home. And, I had a good track record both in terms of sales and delivery, but, I realised after a while, this is crazy. After about 12 months doing that, living out of a suitcase, being in a different place every day, there's excitement that comes from that, but the lifestyle's not great. You're living in hotels, you're eating hotel food, exercising enough, you're probably drinking too much. It just wasn't good, and it wasn't a great lifestyle. And out of the blue, I was contacted by a recruitment consultancy about Bermuda. Like most people, I thought Bermuda was in the Caribbean, which it isn't. It's. I'll be very clear to anybody listening. It's in the North Atlantic. It's 600 miles east of North Carolina. It's subtropical, not tropical. So we do have seasons here, unlike the islands in the Caribbean. And I came here, very, very small country, 60,000 population, 21 square miles. It's 21 miles long, 1 mile wide at the widest point. Healthcare system at the time based very much on a US fee-for-service model. So we have, we have a thing called the charge data master, which has all the charge codes. We use ICD 11 now as the basis of that. We have moved to now a sort of capped revenue model, which is causing the organisation some difficulty financially, and it's a very different culture. I've been here 5 years. It's been great. It's been challenging. It's been frustrating. It's been very, very different from the NHS. And it's an organisation which is a British overseas territory, still falls within the jurisdiction of the FCO in the UK, but looks very much to the US. And so culturally, it's a real clash of cultures, you know.
So you've been at Bermuda pretty much as long as you've been anywhere, I think, Bill. Is that fair? You know, you just...
Longer. This is the longest I've been in role, actually.
I thought so. I mean, coming up to your 5th anniversary in April. And during that time you've been over there, of course, the last couple of years, you've had a worldwide pandemic as well. So just unpack that bit for me in terms of your experience. You've been there as long as you've been anywhere, or longer. You know, something's kept you there. Something's excited you about that. And I also remember when you went across there, I remember you talking to me and others about, or just openly talking about, you weren't going to be there forever, and that you needed in that time to not only build improvement, build the processes, but also build talent management so that you had succession. So how's all that gone?
I think it's it's like a curate's egg. I think, you know, so it's mixed. I would say that during that period of time, we've moved from one basis of funding to another. We've moved from fee for service, where it was all about utilisation, to the government, the Ministry of Health, deciding to cap our revenue position, which has been a real challenge for us because the organisation is heavily unionised, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, to reduce the headcount. That is a real challenge that we've seen. And most of government here, their approach to cost reduction is just to stop doing things. You know, it's a very old-fashioned approach. So, you know, the roads don't get repaired, or the schools don't open as much, or whatever. You know, it's that kind of approach. We've had to take a very different approach, and we've done that with different consultants. We've done it with KPMG, and my view was that we needed to get a different approach to consultancy here. So we brought in, and I was really clear, I wanted KPMG UK to do this because the experience of cost reduction in the NHS is better than any jurisdiction in the world. I've got no doubt about that. Nobody has done as much, as successfully at cutting cost while maintaining the quality of care as the NHS has done. So that was a key thing that we did. Pandemic's been really difficult for Bermuda because the government ran out of money pretty much. And as a consequence of that, the funding that we thought was secured through this capped revenue model actually wasn't. And in financial year 21 rather, so 2021, our funding reduced by, and this is something that I've never seen or experienced before. So we're not talking about flat cash or flat real. We're talking about an absolute reduction in funding. So my funding reduced by $25 million. And as a consequence of that, we had to take $30 million out in 6 months, which we did. And we actually managed to get quite a lot of the staff to agree to a pay cut, which I've never done before. We managed to get staff to agree to effectively suspending their pension contributions, which allowed us to not have to pay our pension contributions too. And all of those things helped us to get to a position where we balanced the financial position. It wasn't all cash releasing. There were one or two accounting changes from the Bill Shields bumper compendium of accounting tricks. There were a few things there where we realized we've got a P3, as we call it here, a PFI. We've got a PFI asset. We changed the depreciation policy, to change the inventory accounting within the organisation in line with GAAP, because we weren't following GAAP at the time. We were expensing everything that came out of the central inventory, as opposed to continue to count it as inventory before it had actually been used. So, implants, prostheses, consumables, and so on and so forth. And that was quite good because it kind of got me back into being an accountant again and getting into some of the more technical aspects of the role. And that's one of the things about the job here. It's It's one of the things that Sir Ian said about me a long time ago in my career, that and I'll take this because he's somebody whose view I respect, that I was one of the few accountants, if maybe the only one he'd come across, who could go between tactical detail and strategic overview. And I would say I've got that ability. I've got that ability to kind of telescope in and out. And it's something that stood me in really good stead. One of the things about Bermuda is I've had to be able to stand back and get really involved. The talent here, I think we've grown some talent, but it's an island of 60,000 people. Anybody that you bring in has got to have a work permit, and the immigration process is quite rigorous, and it takes a long time. So you've got to develop what you've got by and large, and that does mean getting a lot more involved and not being able to assume that the team can take on as much responsibility as I've been used to in the past. Getting change to occur here is incredibly frustrating. Just because something's happened elsewhere and there's evidence doesn't mean that anybody here will necessarily believe that. You've got to go through a PDSA approach for almost everything. You've got to tell somebody, show them, do one, and then kind of you got to the continuous improvement process here is really, really important. So it has been very different for me in terms of a role. It's probably the most different role that I've done in my career. It has been quite salutary in what I've learned here and the skill set that I've had to acquire to be successful here.
And the fact that you've spent 5 years there, Bill, you must be getting a lot from it. You must be feeling you're making good progress and you're moving the organisation forward and you're getting fulfilled yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I had a 3-year contract. I've got another 3-year contract. So, I've got, at the end of this month, I've got a year. And I pretty much decided that will be my last year in Bermuda. So I think 6 years here is long enough. I think that, my domestic situation's changed. And I think the thing for me is I went to HFME conference in December, and because of the pandemic, it was the first time that I'd been there since 2019. And I met a lot of people that I hadn't seen for a long time, and I did a lot of networking. It was really, really great, and I think that was a point when I decided that although I'm getting older, I'm too young to retire, and I've got probably at least one more job in me, I think, and I'm pretty sure that will be in the NHS, assuming that they'll have me back. So I think that's what is the next challenge and the next kind of stopping off point for me.
Bill, I'm going to take you on to the quick fire round. The first one is, you live in a beautiful place. You live in a beautiful part of the world. What do you do outside of work? What keeps you sane? What do you do kind of outside of your day job?
Well, when I came to Bermuda, I bumped into a guy and he said to me, "You know what they say about Bermuda?" And I said, "No, what do they say about Bermuda?" And he said, 60,000 alcoholics clinging to a rock. And you have got to do stuff in Bermuda, or that is the way that you'll end up, really, because it's a great place, but it's a small place. It's a very small island. And certainly during the pandemic, it was really difficult. It was impossible to get off the island because the lockdown here meant the airport was closed and we were in full shelter in place. And if you're not careful, you will end up, that will be your main pastime, just going to the pub. So I took a deliberate decision that I would do something different. So I had been doing yoga a bit kind of haphazardly and a bit sort of randomly. I went on a diet back in 2019, which was helped by having a bout of food poisoning, if I'm honest, and ended up in my own hospital, which was a new experience for 6 days with salmonella. But as I lost weight, the yoga became easier. As the yoga became easier, the weight loss was sustained. And as a consequence, that became really fit. And I do yoga now twice a week. I moved to the apartment I'm in now last March. And when I was exploring it, I found a gym. And in the gym was a treadmill. And I thought, well, I've never run before. I wonder what this is like. So, first time, really, really difficult. Thought I was going to die. And I just kept upping the pace, upping the mileage. And last year I ran my first 5K. And then a couple of weeks later, I ran my first half marathon. I never ever thought I'd enjoy running. I think the combination of running and yoga works quite well because it stops me, touch wood, stops me getting too many injuries. Or actually, I haven't had any injuries yet. So I think it's quite a good combination. And it's something that I do. So there's that. I still play the guitar, not very well. Those are the things that I do.
If you could go back in time, way back, Bill, when you were sort of 18 years old, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Be confident, and whatever you do, make sure that you're happy. And I think that being happy and content in life is something that I've only kind of recognised later in life, probably since I've been here. So I'd say that I'm happier and more content in my life than I've been at any point. And while I was very successful in my career, it's important that you don't see that as the only thing and the only way in which you can become fulfilled. It's that old saying is that, nobody on their deathbed says, I wish I'd spent more time at the office. And that's absolutely true. Work's an important part of my life and I find it very rewarding and fulfilling. That's probably my kind of Presbyterian upbringing. But you've got to be happy and you've got to be content and you've got to have a well-balanced life. And I don't think I've had the balance in my life until probably the last couple of years. And it's been much better.
If we were going to make a film about your life, who would play you in that film?
It'd obviously be, well, the problem with that is that, as anybody that knows me, I'm only 5'4". So I guess it'd need to be Tom Cruise or somebody even shorter than him. But he's probably about the same age as me as well, but he's obviously not as good looking as I am. But
listen, Bill, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been, you've got such a proven record of delivering in such high-profile roles consistently, moving the dial forward, setting a new bar for those that follow. I just wanted to thank you for the part you've played in my career. I'm sure I speak for a lot of people that you've crossed paths with along the way. You've mentioned so many people in this podcast. It's been lovely to hear some of those names again and those stories. But before we leave the podcast, Bill, is there anything more you'd like to say? Is there anything we've missed or anything you'd like to say to anybody listening to this podcast?
No, I think, what people will realise if they listen to this is I do talk a lot, and I do like to talk. I've been told I like the sound of my own voice sometimes. But no, I think that, I've enjoyed my career. I don't think that, there's anything that I would rather have done. And I don't think there's anything that I would have been better at, if I'm honest. And I'm just really grateful that, healthcare finance has given me a livelihood that I've enjoyed, and it's allowed me to help and support people that I've met along the way. As I say, I would encourage anybody in healthcare finance to get involved in HFMA. I'm just trying to give HFMA a plug. HFMA has been a constant for me in my career, from the time I was a trainee all the way through to being a DOF, to being a CFO, and even now, HFMA has been the constant for me. And I don't think I would have achieved half what I've achieved without the support and the involvement and the camaraderie, which is a really important thing for me that comes from HFMA. It's been the constant for me through my career. A lot of things have changed. The NHS has changed, the structure's changed, the reporting's changed, the faces have changed, the approach has changed, but HFMA has been a constant, and I hope it always will be.
Thank you, Bill. And to everyone listening in, thank you for choosing HFMA Talk. Please spread the word as well as subscribing to HFMA Talk on your podcast app. And if there's anyone that you'd like me to have a conversation with next, then please do get in touch via policy@hfma.org.uk. But until next time, it's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from Bill.